the forgotten World War I survival stove that outperformed modern tech. In the frozen hell of World War I, soldiers weren't just fighting enemies. They were fighting the cold, the mud, and, well, even their own breath turning to frost inside the trenches. Amid all the chaos, a quiet invention emerged that didn't fire bullets or block shrapnel. It simply made heat. A tiny, collapsible stove that could boil tea, dry socks, and honestly bring back the feeling of being human in a world stripped of comfort. It burned low, clean, and fierce, a design so efficient that even today's high-end survival gear can't quite beat it. Yet, when the war ended, this miracle of efficiency all but vanished from memory. This is the story of the World War I trench stove, the forgotten survival tool that could teach even the most seasoned prepper a thing or two about staying alive when the world goes dark. The war that froze men before it killed them. By the winter of 1915, the Western Front had turned into a frozen graveyard of mud and misery. Men lived knee-deep in sludge, surrounded by barbed wire and artillery shells, fighting more often against frostbite than the enemy. The rain turned earth into tar, and the air itself seemed to gnaw at their bones. Fires were almost impossible. Wood was soaked, smoke gave away positions, and even a flicker of light could draw sniper fire. But soldiers still needed heat. They needed to warm up a can of meat, brew a tin of tea, dry a pair of socks before they froze stiff. And in the absence of supplies, soldiers did what humans always do when pushed to the edge. They innovated. Out of scrap metal, food tins, and even empty shell casings, they built stoves. Crude at first, then brilliant. What made the trench stove so revolutionary wasn't some secret fuel or fancy gadgetry. It was simplicity itself. Soldiers discovered that by channeling airflow the right way, oxygen in from the bottom, exhaust out the top, they could make even damp fuel burn hotter, cleaner, and longer. This chimney effect became the backbone of their field designs. One of the first mass-issued versions was the Tommy cooker used by British troops. It was small enough to fit in a pack, used a block of solidified alcohol for fuel, and could boil water in minutes. Simple, yes, but life-saving. When official rations of fuel ran out, soldiers improvised. They crafted their own from ration tins, punching holes near the base for air intake and using anything that would burn: wax, paraffin, cardboard, even bacon grease. German troops had their own take: the Esbit stove, fueled by compact solid fuel tablets. It was so effective that the same basic design is still used by NATO troops today. The French preferred paraffin-based stoves with collapsible frames, again the same principle. Small, low smoke, fuel-efficient heat. Here's where things get fascinating. Most fires waste energy because they let heat escape in every direction. The trench stove concentrated it. Air entered from the bottom, feeding the flame while drawing the smoke up and out through a narrow top opening. This airflow created a natural draft, a self-sustaining pull of oxygen that kept the fire steady without blowing it out. That meant a handful of twigs could heat an entire meal. Soldiers turned spent rifle cartridges into fuel pods stuffed with wax or sawdust soaked in oil. Some even built double-walled versions using 2 cans, essentially early prototypes of what we now call rocket stoves. These were incredibly efficient, low smoke, high heat, and almost no wasted energy. Compared to modern gas stoves, these trench-built heaters required no pressurized fuel, no valves, no fancy igniters. Just physics, fire, and resourcefulness. Now, let's get practical. Because, you know, the genius of this World War I stove isn't locked in the past. You can still make one in under 10 minutes. Take 2 cans, one slightly smaller than the other. Punch a ring of small holes near the bottom of the larger can for air intake and a few near the top for exhaust. Place the smaller can inside as your burn chamber. Add twigs, wax or rolled cardboard soaked in fuel and light from the bottom. Within seconds, the flame will draw upward, creating that same powerful chimney effect soldiers depended on. What you'll get is a clean-burning, wind-resistant flame that produces little smoke and maximum heat. This isn't just a nostalgic experiment. It's a real survival tool. Perfect for camping, emergency kits, or even urban power outages. It teaches a simple but powerful lesson. Control the air, and you control the fire. Why such brilliance was forgotten. After the war, industrial production exploded. Liquid fuel and pressurized stoves hit the market, promising convenience over craft. As time went on, soldiers returned home, the trenches were filled in, and the trench stove, well, it faded into obscurity. But, you know, its spirit lived on. The Esbit stove, for instance, carried its DNA. And so did the rocket stove, which was developed decades later for efficient wood burning. Even those ultralight titanium stoves, so popular with modern hikers, trace their lineage back to the trench. You see, the materials changed. Aluminum instead of tin solid fuel tablets, instead of bacon grease. But the airflow principle that never died. In truth, the trench stove wasn't forgotten because it failed. It was forgotten because it succeeded so completely that its lessons became invisible, absorbed into everything that came after. What made the trench stove powerful wasn't the metal or the design, it was the mindset. In the filth of the trenches, with death lurking overhead, men used scraps and soot to invent comfort. They built something that could turn despair into warmth, cold mud into steam for tea, hopeless nights into bearable ones. That's the kind of resourcefulness survivalists and historians still chase today. The principle behind it, small, smart, self-reliant fire, is as valuable now as it was a century ago. Whether you're out camping, caught in a blackout, or just fascinated by human ingenuity, this forgotten fieldcraft proves one thing. Survival isn't about tools. It's about understanding. If you can control airflow, manage heat, and adapt to your environment, you can survive almost anywhere. That's the real secret, hidden inside a dented tin stove from the mud of France. Why this matters today, you might wonder. Well, we live in a world that's, quite frankly, obsessed with gear. Fancy gadgets, high-tech camping stoves, pressurized gas. These are the things that can fail the moment nature decides to turn nasty. The soldiers of World War I, they didn't have that luxury, you see. They relied on knowledge, not packaging. And, you know, that's the skill worth reviving. You can use their principle today to make a stove from household scrap. Just test it in your backyard and, well, learn how to create a clean flame with minimal fuel. Once you do, you'll understand exactly what those men felt, a small, stubborn victory against the cold. Because sometimes survival isn't about dominating nature. It's about partnering with it. So, if this piece of forgotten wartime ingenuity sparked something in you, don't let it fade again. Subscribe to HistoryHQ for more deep dives into human resilience, forgotten inventions, and survival skills that still hold up 100 years later. Share this with your fellow history buffs and outdoor enthusiasts, because, honestly, some lessons are just too valuable to stay buried in the mud of the past.